Now, you may be wondering, how did I end up here? Well, basically, this happens when the stone is absorbing too much ink and I didn't wet it. So, we're gonna start all over again. So, to begin with your stone, you're gonna have to fill a bucket of water, and buckets are gonna be very useful throughout this project, and as well as keeping your stone wet, because that's how we ended up in that mistake in the first place. Now we are going to prepare our stone doing the graining process, and we're going to use coarsest grit to finest, and this ensures that our stone is leveled and doesn't absorb too much ink. Now here you see me using a tool called the Levigator. I'm going to rotate it throughout my stone, and be sure that when you're adding abrasives like all the grit, be sure to make it damp so that way it doesn't dry up and it doesn't cause any scratches or severe damage to your stone, because we don't want our stone to concave. So doing this, we're going to be doing for 3 minutes per grit, so I'm going to do 80, 80, 80 for 3 minutes each, and you go on from 80, 100 to 220. Now after it dries, I'm going to be grinding down my edges so that way when we're printing, our paper does not get ripped, torn, and stuff. So after that, it's going to be dried, and we're going to put gum arabic on our edges so that way the grease does not get absorbed. And here is the greasy crayons, as I would like to call it, but it's perfect for drawing. Now I'm going to be using a graphite pencil to draw on my image because graphite is not greasy. Meanwhile, the actual lithography crayons, they're greasy. They're very greasy. It goes from number 1 to 4, 4 being the least greasiest and 1 being the most greasiest. Now after you draw on your image, you're going to be adding rosin, and we're going to put this all over our stone. Alright, this is going to make sure that our image is secured and it's stable. So after we do this, we are actually going to be wrapping it up and putting it back into the container that we took it out of. So you see me putting into the container. Now we're going to be adding talc after the rosin, and talc, we are not recycling this only because there's already rosin on the stone and it's not pure talc, so I don't recommend that you try putting it back into the container. So here you're going to see me take it off of our stone, and this is after I put it all over. Now follow me, we're going to dispose of it. Just put it into the trash. Don't even try recycling, it's fine. And there we go. Once that is done, we put on our gloves, and we're going to gum our edges once more, our borders, so that way it doesn't get stained. So after you do that, we are going to use this mixture of nitric acid and gum arabic, which will etch our stone. And I will swap out my brush so that way I could brush on this etching acid onto our stone. We had to work pretty fast actually, and here you see me spot etching just a little bit. The more you brush it on your stone, the better, so that way it distributes all over. Now here you also see me using a cheesecloth, so that way I buff it off and wipe it off before it gets all dry and sticky, which we don't want. And we want to also clean our cheesecloth after we're done with the buffing process. Our stone can etch with a thin layer of acid, that's okay. We're going to re-etch it later on. So here you see me pinning my cheesecloth after washing it, and we're going to make sure we carefully pick up our stone and let it to dry for 10 to 12 hours. And for the next day, you're actually going to see me use gum arabic once more for my borders, just to make sure that it's okay. Now, after that, we're going to spot etch the dark parts, knowing that this is the greasiest parts that we want to hold the most ink. And then after that, we're going to put it all over our stone. Again, the longer you brush, the better, but we also want to speed up the process so that way it doesn't dry and get sticky, and then you won't be able to buff your stone again with a cheesecloth. So after that, you wipe it off with the dirty sponge. I did not show it in the video, but you wipe it off with a dirty sponge and a bucket. That's going to be very useful. Keep a clean bucket around and a dirty bucket around. You also saw me marking where my stone is on the printing press, and I'm going to be testing the pressure, making sure that I'm able to pull the lever but also have a really good pressure that is able to hold my stone into place. Like here, you're going to see me struggle a little bit, but it's still able to go down. That's the perfect pressure that we want our stone to have. And to test it out, I actually put like parchment paper and this plastic thing on top. And I am going to use this gum that it makes the printing press run smoothly and it doesn't stagger while we're trying to print, because we want a consistent print. Sorry, I'm speaking very fast. But after that, I'm going to show how my pressure looks like from first point of view, and there we go. So we're going to rotate it that way, clockwise, and it should be able to run smoothly. And I'm making sure that I don't go off my stone because we don't want to flip our stone. And I'm going to actually mark where that starting point of the tape is. I'm going to mark where it ends. And I actually also marked where it started. Now we're going to move on with Lithography, and we're going to wipe off our image. That is super scary, but we're going to wipe it off. See me wiping it off. Rags are very useful throughout this process. Then moving on with a different rag, we are going to be using asphaltum. A little bit of asphaltum works. And then we're going to use a little bit of Lithography to thin that out. This will ink our stone back once more, but not too much, not too little. So there you see me rubbing a thin layer onto my stone, making sure that everything is covered. Not too much. Do not cake it onto your stone. I don't recommend this. And of course, keep on your gloves the whole time, please. Now we're going to wipe it off with Lithography, making sure that it's not heavily concentrated. And yeah, I use a dirty sponge. I think, I showed my little dirty bucket. So, dirty bucket, make sure to wipe it off. Keep our stone damp. This is going to be super important. Now, I probably put too much water. I recommend you not be able to see the water droplets. It's just going to be like a light damp. I also recommend you use real sponges. I use like synthetic sponges and it doesn't work properly. Now, after you do that, we are going to ink our stone, so that way it's ready to ink and ready to absorb into the etched areas of our stone. So be sure to ink out a thin layer. This is super important, so that way you don't create the mistake that we started off with. Yeah, there's a flashback, so that way you remember not to put too much ink. I didn't know how to use a roller, so figure out how to have a thin layer, please. Now, you're going to see me damp my stone while I'm inking. This is very important throughout the printing process. Be sure to always make sure your stone is damp. Now, once I roll on the ink is going to be absorbed into the greasy areas, and the damp area is going to repel that ink. So that's super important. So the water stands on the parts that are not etched, which is perfect. But the water does not go into the etched areas of your stone. Now, after you ink, you can actually print. So you see me damp my stone again between damping my paper. So yeah, I'm making sure everything's clean. We put on our paper, and on top of that paper, we're going to use brown parchment paper, and then we're going to put our plastic thingy. I'm going to put the proper terms so that way you guys are not misinformed. So that is how you set it up, and after that we are actually able to test our pressure, perfect pressure, and roll it up. Be very careful when you're rolling it up. We don't want to flip our stone, please. And after that, it's done. You're done with your first print. That's it. And in case y'all want to know how to clean your stone, we're going to use Lithography so that way we can remove the ink and then wipe it off with a dirty sponge. And you're going to start the whole grinding process all over again, in case you were wondering. And that is pretty much how we ended up printing our successful print after our mistake. So be sure to leave your stone surfaced for the next person. That would be very polite. And that's pretty much our amateur's guide on how to print. So that way you guys don't do the mistake that I did from the way beginning and end up here. So that's pretty much it. And here's a little close-up to see little etches. And this is super important. Have a fresh acid ready to etch. And I wish you guys the best of luck with your first prints. Bye bye.